Welcome back, folks, mere mortals. We are here with another book review. Today, I have got Range by David Epstein. Range, How Generalists Triumph in a Specialised World. Now, I'm hot off the press finishing off this book, so I've got it right fresh in my mind. So let's get into it. Now, first of all, why did I get into this book? Well, first of all, it was provided to me by someone, so I thought it'd be pretty cool. But I've always had this view that I'm a generalist. I'm a very hardcore generalist, and I can probably talk about how I see myself in that way. But I've always thought, is this an issue? And this book has proved to me that it is not an issue, and in fact, it is a top thing for you to be a bit of a generalist and not a specialized person in this world. So David Epstein, he's actually produced a book before Range, and it was called The Sports Gene. Now, he himself has said that he put around 150% more effort into producing this book than Sports Gene. And the Sports Gene focused on basically sports and the definition there around specialization and range, or, what he calls the Tiger versus Roger effect. So obviously the Tiger Woods, specializing from when he was very, very young, 2 years old, playing golf, all the way to becoming sort of number one in the world at golf. And Roger Federer, where he tried out quite a few different things on his way to becoming one of the greatest tennis players of all times. Obviously, two different things. One, what you could consider a hyper-specialist, and the other one, a general individual, more generalized and specialized. But he then sort of put that together into Range and actually expanded it well beyond, I think, the drive there was, okay, he was seeing that obviously in sports, and a lot of people were saying, well, does this exist in other areas? And indeed, it does. So the book itself is 300 pages of goodness and stories. So the way that David likes to tell or actually wrote this book is all with stories. And right off the bat, I'm going to say that it's probably 10 stories too many. So David, 10 stories too many. I found myself, as I was reading through the book, I thought, these chapters, you could have conceded in the way that you're trying to storytell here to bring it back, tighten it up a little bit. Like, I get the point. I don't need to see another story, but you can tell the sheer amount of effort that went into obtaining all that information, the interviews that he undertook for the book. So that was phenomenal. So general thoughts on the actual book itself. So apart from the fact that it's packed with stories, and I did say it's a little bit of a negative, it is a positive in the way that you can... Some of the best ways of learning, I find, at least for me personally, is through stories, especially engaging stories, because I can have the curiosity to actually keep on reading and take away that solid foundation. And this book is structured in that way. So I'd almost say it's 50 to 70 stories throughout the book. That's mapped out against a particular topic or discussion point amongst many things in terms of the science behind a generalist versus specialist. So, he talks a little bit around learning and showcases some stories around the American teaching and how that has been the way that some students get taught can be an ineffective way in terms of learning, and the comparisons between short-term learning and long-term learning. But then there's other stories around, say, Challenger and the failures that happen with the O-ring there, and then compares it out to a lot of different stories. So if you want to enjoy stories and the way that you learn from that, then you're going to be very happy about this one. But as I said, I found it there was a slight amount too many for the 300 pages. Could have compressed that a bit. Also, one of the key takeaways, the key items that you could pick up from Range, obviously to read it yourself. So one is the position of becoming cognitively entrenched into something. So that was one of the items in Range where he talked about one of the issues becoming specialized or hyper-specialized, if becoming so entrenched into that field that you can't see the interconnected dots across the broader systems of the broader space. So there was immeasurable amount of stories in here where there was specialized people, and by specialized there were PhD individuals, potentially in microbiology or biology, that been studying the same thing for 20 to 30 years, and for some reason they couldn't sort out a particular issue. And one of the examples in the story is, there was a company who had been trying to sort out this particular issue, I believe it's a microbiological issue, and they essentially just put it out to the community at large. Can you guys help us out in figuring this out? And a lot of people already thought at that point from the company, I don't really think this is going to work. Like, how are these people out in the community going to be able to answer this question where we are supposed to be the experts? But lo and behold, people out there who had more range. By range here is the ability to just connect things that are external to just that entrenched view, obviously the cognitive entrenchment, to be able to connect and go, oh, well, I've seen something in my past or something in other places that I've worked that, I can use the analogy that what's working there and bring it over into this area to actually make it work. So that was obviously a big piece, and there's lots of stories there. Obviously, the story around Kepler and the idea of him using analogies to figure out that the planets don't sit on tracks, but actually there's something, not souls, but something that actually pushes the planets round and round and round. So. Another one is the learning. Usually that is durable and flexible. Generally doesn't come easy. So this is another point. One of the really key points I wanted to take away from range and sort of share was the inflexibility that we have with some of our learning styles. So I can personally say I fall into this trap where I believe that I am learning in the short term by way, I'll give you an example, reading a book, or listening to a podcast or listening to a lecture. And I might think that I'm learning because I can recall a lot of things, either that I took notes or that I'm just purely listening. And maybe they might ask you, oh, do you understand this? And I can kind of like parrot back, or they can help me out in that conversation. And it might feel like you're learning, but in terms of its flexibility, i.e. how well you can sort of spread that information into a broader range, and its durability, how long they're going to stick around, it's usually the more inefficient ways of learning that are going to actually stick around, and you're going to be able to use them in a more malleable way. So the example, again, in this book that they pulled out was at school, teachers doing their best to help out kids and to try to get them to understand a particular concept, rather than letting them be challenged and get the wrong answers and then learn from those wrong answers. They might help in suggesting what it actually is. So, let's say an example, 2 + 2 is 4, when you're teaching some kids around what 2 + 2 it should be, they might go, it's 3, or no, it's 2. And you might give them an idea, it could be 4 or 1. So what do you think? And you give them a bit of advice and they go, okay, well, it's 4. Right, so he talks about in the book, David, that perhaps the fact that you're actually aiding them in that manner and taking away the challenge actually prevents them from having much more durable and flexible learning. So that was a really cool point. I guess the effective learning actually looks inefficient, which is one of the biggest points I took away. One of the other ones as well was a thinker can become worse, not better, by the additional information that they're provided. Now, I think it was in this book, but it's an example that's given in a lot of other places, and it's around individuals who are professional horse bettors. And the more information that you provide to them, the more confidence they gain in the results of what they believe who's going to win in terms of the horses, increases in terms of confidence, but actually their ability to pick the correct winner, it actually decreases or doesn't improve. So it's not like the actual final outcome improves, but your confidence actually increases. And so one of these items here talking about, especially for specialization, was that the more entrenched you become into a particular area, so biology, physics, pick your area, sports, music, the more you go into it, the more you think that you actually know absolutely everything and become more confident that either you're the only person that can solve it, or you're confident that nobody else can know what you're talking about, and then become, I guess, another way of calling out the entrenchment that you can get into a particular topic. So it called out to me, it was just how many, through all the stories in range, how many places that I originally thought, oh, well, they're specialized. But, when you actually dig into the true story, so here, the typical one is Roger Federer. If someone had told me that Roger Federer was a generalist, not a specialist, I would have gone, oh, really? Like, I'm sure he's played a lot when he was in his younger teens and everything. But when you compare it to what the general consensus is for when you should be given sport, well, you should have been specialized when you were 12 years old, and you should be working double as hard because that's the only way you're going to, actually become the top of the game. But that is just not true. And obviously David lays this out in a lot of detail with a lot of scientific proof and a lot of stories. And so it makes me think there's a lot of places where we believe people are actually specialized until we really dig down and find that actually, no, they're more generalist than we think. They're just late specialists. And that's probably the key takeaway that I wanted to pull out from Range, right? So he's got generalists versus specialists. And it wasn't to say that, you should be a generalist, full stop, you shouldn't be a specialist. No, it wasn't the case for that in terms of what's more beneficial. It was more along the lines of you shouldn't worry that you're a late starter. You shouldn't worry that you're a late starter. You shouldn't worry that you're missing out because you didn't have those 5 extra years to go and do tennis practice because you were playing soccer. No. The fact that you played other sports or the fact that you played another musical instrument or that you studied something different, that actually helps and supports you in whatever else you might be doing. But he doesn't dissuade from the fact that later on in life, then you can actually specialize. So in the case of a Roger Federer, he was generalized for a period of time, let's say 10 years old to 16 years old, and then he specialized in tennis and then used those skills and that information that he learned from that and translated it over. Similarly, how I take it is, let's say that for 20 years you do engineering or accounting or a couple of other things, and then you start specializing into something that you really love, let's say microbiology, and you use all these other things that you've learned along the way to actually help you connect the dots broader and not get stuck in that cognitive entrenchment. So that's, I guess, the biggest takeaway. For me, I guess that final thought was, it is true. Well, it is all true in this book. I just don't think that hyper-specialisation is a bad thing. It's just when you actually decide to hyper-specialise, that seems to be the problem in the matter. So that is Range by David Epstein. Of course, I'm going to recommend for you to go and read this book. I've given it a 7.5. I really enjoyed it. If I had a couple of less stories, I would have enjoyed it even more, just because it would have been a little bit quicker. I'm a slow reader in comparison to our other mere mortal here, Karen. But yeah, truly enjoyed it. Its ability to connect stories, the scientific proof, the interviews, and a little scatter of his own thoughts, obviously from what he learned on the sports gene and some of the ways that he has seen, obviously, this compared to him. It probably should have done this at the beginning, but just to give you an idea, David himself is the sort of authored the sports gene, but he has a master's degree in environmental sciences and journalism, and actually worked as an investigative reporter and a senior writer for Sports Illustrated. So he actually touches in the actual book itself, but even he demonstrates how he has a bit of a range, because he began in what he thought he wanted to do, went through to his master's, and then kind of went full circle back to a writer. So to everyone out there who is much more a generalist than a specialist, so if you're worried that you want to become a pro soccer player, you're 18 years old and you didn't start when you were 10, well, might have something else coming for you. You might just be a generalist and ready to go to stardom. So I'm sure I'll see you in 15 years. And if that's you and this motivated you to become a famous player, then you can send a nice check my way, or the Mere Mortals. Folks, that's been Range by David Epstein. Mere Mortals, one out.